The Linguiverse presents the Shadow Spectrum episode 8 Boundaries of Fear, Control, Order and the Illusion of Safety, the Anatomy of Anxiety and Rigidity. Welcome back to the Linguiverse presents the Shadow Spectrum. In this reflection we turn toward a subtler mask of the shadow, one that rarely rages, rarely charms, rarely seduces, yet governs much of our modern psyche, the mask of control. If previous explorations have led us through the emotional architectures of manipulation, performance, and protection, this one leads us into a quieter citadel, a mind that builds safety from symmetry, comfort from certainty, and identity from instruction. This is the realm of the Order Keeper, the Watcher, and the Volatile, three archetypal expressions of anxiety that reveal how fear, when refined through intellect, crystallizes into rule, routine, and rigidity. Each believes in a singular salvation. The Order Keeper finds peace in perfection. The Watcher seeks safety in suspicion. The Volatile looks for love through control, but beneath their precision lies a common prayer. If I can control the world, perhaps I can calm my nerves. In this episode, we'll examine how language becomes the architecture of fear, how words, phrasing, tone, and syntax turn inattention into outer law, and more crucially, how the very scripts that kept us safe once now keep us small. From chaos to compass, why the anxious mind builds rules every nervous system is an author. Long before we learn grammar, we speak through gesture, tone, and rhythm, weaving a living syntax from heartbeat and breath. Under threat, this syntax changes, sentences shorten, tone sharpens, and words loop. In fear, language becomes less about expression and more about prevention. Trauma, uncertainty, or chronic instability often birth the same adaptive dream, control as containment. If life has proven volatile, rules promise stillness. If love has proven conditional, order promises continuity. If chaos once shattered safety, precision promises protection. In clinical psychology, we might trace this to intolerance of uncertainty, Carlton, 2016, the cognitive bias that perceives unpredictability as peril. In linguistics, we can hear it in ritualized speech patterns. Phrases like I have to, I can't, I always, it must. These are modal auxiliaries of survival, words that bind the psyche to the illusion of control. Each must is a moral, a micro-commandment whispered to tame disorder. In nervous system language, NSL, such phrasing reflects a sympathetic loop, a body braced for impact, seeking control through cognition. Yet as control calcifies, curiosity decays. The mind builds walls not from malice, but from memory, forgetting that safety and spontaneity are not enemies, but kin. Fear's grammar. The architecture of anxiety is not noise, it is syntax in distress. When the world feels unsafe, language attempts to legislate it. Consider the lexicon of the anxious. Hedges, just maybe, sort of soften presence. Overqualifiers, technically, actually, really seek precision as protection. Conditionals, if then, create a safety simulation, a verbal rehearsal of danger avoided. Each phrase is a spell, a micro-incantation for control. Through mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, we understand these not merely as cognitive habits, but as echoes of physiology. The sentence mirrors the state. When the breath is tight, the syntax is tense. When the body holds, the words hedge. When the chest softens, language lengthens, clauses unfurl like exhales. Thus, our linguistic architecture reflects our autonomic architecture. A rigid phrase is a rigid diaphragm, a looping sentence is a looping thought. A softened voice is a ventral signal, I am safe enough to speak slowly. By tracing this symmetry, we gain not only linguistic insight but somatic literacy, a way of reading the body's script through the mouth's melody. The illusion of safety, certainty as a cage. The shadow's genius lies in inversion, transforming wisdom into weaponry. Structure is sacred, rigidity is its shadow, discipline brings direction, perfectionism demands penance, order offers orientation, control enforces confinement. In our pursuit of safety, we may create theatre instead of truth. We choreograph our days with ritual precision, to-do lists as liturgy, calendars as catechisms. Yet beneath the poise hums a tremor, the fear that if we pause, the world will unravel. Psychologically, this is the safety behavior paradox, Tsiolkovsky's 1991. The more we perform control, the less we trust resilience. Spiritually, it echoes the myth of Babel, building towers of logic to outclimb chaos, only to find confusion at the summit. Linguistically, we witness repetitive sequencing verbal loops that mimic neural ones. I just need to make sure, I just want to be clear, I just have to check once more. Each repetition is reassurance in disguise, a verbal rocking motion, soothing the unseen child. The nervous system's bargain, predictability over presence in polyvagal theory. Porges 2011, safety arises not from certainty but connection. Yet to the anxious system, connection is unpredictable, control is dependable. Thus, fear makes a bargain. I'll trade presence for predictability. This exchange reshapes our relationships. We choose routines over risks. We prefer obedience to openness. We demand from others what we cannot grant ourselves. Permanence. But permanence is a myth. Language itself proves it. Every word is momentary, mutable, vanishing upon utterance. To insist on absolute order is to refuse the organic rhythm of conversation, of life. When fear writes the script, dialogue becomes decree. We stop listening, start legislating. Every interaction becomes a courtroom, tone on trial, timing cross-examined. Such rigidity breeds loneliness, not because others withdraw, but because we mistake surrender for safety, locking the door from the inside, calling the silence peace. The triad of tension, order, vigilance, volatility, the order keeper, watcher, and volatile are not villains. They are linguistic custodians of safety. Each developed a dialect of defense, fluent in the syntax of survival. The order keeper says, if I structure the world, I'll never feel lost. The watcher says, if I foresee betrayal, I'll never be blindsided. The volatile says, if I express intensity, I'll never be invisible. Together, they illustrate the spectrum of control, from stillness to scanning to storm. Each seeks safety through a different verb, stabilize, scrutinize, surge. But all share the same preposition, against. Control is a preposition of fear, a stance, a syntax, a shield, and yet within each lies wisdom awaiting translation. An order can become an organization. Vigilance can become discernment. Volatility can become vitality. By listening to the linguistic echoes of fear, we can transmute anxiety into awareness, rigidity into rhythm, and control into coherence. The lexicon of rigidity, how language reveals the grip. If you listen closely, rigidity reveals itself not in words alone, but in collapse. This is grace encoded in grammar, responsiveness over rigidity, humility over hierarchy. Reflection prompt. What would break if you stopped holding on? Ask not only what might fall apart, but what might finally fall into place. Practice. Identify one mental rule you've mistaken for truth, a must, should, or never. Soften its syntax. Replace must with may, should with could. Notice the shift in breath, tone, and tempo. Each substitution is not semantic play, but somatic permission, a nervous system unlearning the illusion of law. In this journey, we'll move from the architecture of control to the acoustics of sovereignty, tracing how fear shapes speech and how speech can reshape fear. Because safety is not a structure, but a symmetry, a resonance between language, body, and belief. The order keeper, when control becomes a compass, obsessive traits, and the architecture of safety. Some minds map before they move, souls that cannot rest until each thread is tied, each drawer aligned, each word placed precisely where it belongs. To outsiders, this looks like discipline. To the nervous system, it feels like defense. The order keeper archetype is not born from arrogance or obsession, but from injury transposed into instruction. It is the child who learned that chaos punished, the adult who learned that control protects. To understand them is to witness the intelligence of anxiety, the exquisite craftsmanship of a psyche that builds safety through symmetry. When fear becomes a sculptor, it carves the world into grids. Every action becomes an algorithm, every choice a chess move an invisible game against uncertainty. In this section, we'll explore how language itself becomes the geometry of control, the blueprint through which the anxious mind tries to translate into order. The psychology of order. Predictability as peace in clinical psychology, the constellation of obsessive traits often clusters around OCPD, obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, rather than OCD itself, with less fixation on ritual, more reverence for rules. Where OCD fights the mind's own chaos, OCPD fights the world. It is a disorder of certainty, a compulsion to systematize reality so thoroughly that the unknown has no entry point. For many, these traits emerge not from pathology, but from adaptation. In volatile homes, where love was conditional or discipline unpredictable, the child learns an equation. Perfection equals predictability, which equals peace. Each grade on a test becomes a talisman, each completed task a charm against rejection. Through repetition, reassurance hardens into ritual. Soon, safety becomes synonymous with success, and every deviation feels like danger. The order keeper's nervous system does not seek thrill, but tranquility through mastery. Yet mastery quickly mutates into monitoring, and vigilance wears the mask of virtue. What begins as a love of structure becomes a fear of spontaneity, a mistrust of flow. In the lexicon of control, curiosity sounds careless, surprise, unsafe. This is the first paradox of order. What calms the system initially may constrict it ultimately. Reflection. What rule began as reassurance? Ask yourself, which of your commandments was once a comfort? Trace it to its birthplace, a childhood moment, a crisis, a wound. Then ask, does it still serve me, or do I now serve it? Identification activity. Write down your 3 strongest musts. For each ask, when did this rule begin? What fear did it quiet? What would happen if it softened? Then rewrite each as a may. Observe the nervous system's reaction, a breath, a twitch, a tremor. Your body will tell you which rules are ready to retire. Integration practice. For 1 week, replace one must with may in daily speech. Example, I must answer now identifies and translates as I may need time to think. Note the shift in tempo, tone, and tension. The nervous system understands permission more fluently than pressure. Each softened sentence rewires safety, from conditional to conscious. The order keeper's journey is not to abolish order, but to reclaim authorship, to write rules that serve rhythm and live laws that breathe. Because the highest form of control is not command, it's composure, the watcher, the eyes that never rest, paranoia, hypervigilance, and the grammar of anticipation. The architecture of vigilance. If the order keeper builds grids, the watcher builds mirrors. Every surface reflects a potential threat. Every gesture becomes a glyph to decode. This is not curiosity, it's cartography, the psychic labor of mapping unseen intentions. Paranoia, in its adaptive form, is the art of anticipation. It is what saved our ancestors, the intuitive twitch before the predator moved, the instinct to scan the horizon for shifting shadows. But when survival circuitry never sleeps, vigilance ceases to serve, it begins to consume. The watcher archetype arises when safety is not a memory, but a mystery. In chaotic or deceitful environments, perception becomes a weapon, eyes sharpened, ears tuned to tremor. The child learns to relax is to risk, thus awareness hardens into armor. The watcher sees not what is, but what could be, every silence suspicious, every kindness calculation. Psychologically, this is hypervigilance, the chronic overactivation of threat detection networks in the amygdala and insula, paired with hypoactivity in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the region that appraises actual danger, Etkin et al., 2011. Somatically, vigilance is vertical tension, lifted shoulders, darting eyes, shallow breathing. Linguistically, it is anticipatory syntax, sentences front-loaded with conditionals, if, unless, just in case, and modal verbs of contingency, might, could, should. In MLH terms, paranoia is a semantic echo chamber. Each word ricochets against its own projection, confirming what it suspects. Language ceases to describe reality, it defends against it. The psychology of paranoia. The unseen hand paranoia is not madness, it's misapplied meaning. The paranoid psyche perceives patterns with exquisite accuracy, but assigns motive where only motion exists. When unpredictability once hurt, the mind internalizes a law. All change conceals intention. In psychodynamic framing, this emerges from betrayal trauma, experiences where those meant to protect instead deceived. The child learns to doubt assurance and trust apprehension. Thus, suspicion becomes self-soothing. To anticipate harm feels safer than to risk surprise. Cognitive models, Freeman and Garrity, 2014, show that paranoia flourishes when anxiety, negative self-beliefs, and anomalous experiences converge. The mind misreads internal arousal, my heart races, as an external threat, someone's watching. In relationships, this becomes a grammar of accusation. Even affection is passed for falsity. Phrases like, what did you really mean by that? You're being too nice. What do you want? I know you're hiding something. Each utterance seeks certainty in the syntax of suspicion. This is the linguistic inflation of motive. Verbs of assumption, think, want, plan, replace verbs of observation. See here, notice. Over time, description yields to deduction, and language mirrors fear, not fact. The somatic lens. The body as alarm in nervous system language. Paranoia is sympathetic hypertonicity, the body tuned perpetually to threat frequencies. Breath is clipped, gaze narrow, muscles micro-contracted, the posture of preemption. The watcher's diaphragm acts as a barometer, rising and falling with each perceived cue. Startle response remains hair trigger, auditory thresholds are lower. Every creak in the floorboard is a footstep, every pause in conversation, a plot. Neuroscientifically, this corresponds with amygdala overactivation and reduced hippocampal volume, impairing endless search for proof. But life is not a closed system, not all truths are testable. The antidote is ontological trust, a faith not in others, but in one's capacity to respond. As Kierkegaard noted, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. To stand unshielded before uncertainty is to reclaim agency. In linguistic terms, this is the shift from interrogative dominance, why did you, to dialogic openness, what's happening for you? From demanding to discovering, the reframed archetype, from watcher to witness. When vigilance integrates, the watcher becomes the witness, one who perceives without projecting. Their eyes remain sharp, but now soft-focused. Their language slows, syntax expands, tone descends. They become guardians of nuance, translators of silence. Their gift, the ability to sense the unsaid, evolves into empathic insight, not accusation. In this evolution, awareness ceases to be alarm, it becomes attunement. Suspicion turns to stewardship, watching not for harm, but for harmony. Reflection prompt. When have I mistaken awareness for attack? Recall a moment when your perception leapt ahead of proof. What did you assume? What emotion drove it? Fear, shame, grief. How did your words mirror that emotion? Identification activity. Record a recent dialogue that triggered mistrust. Note, tone shifts. Did your pitch rise? Word choices. Did you use absolutes or interrogatives? Somatic cues, heart rate, jaw tension. Rewrite one accusatory sentence into an invitational phrase. Observe how your body responds. Does breath deepen, or does defense persist? Integration practice. For 1 week, practice noticing, not naming. When you sense a threat, pause before interpretation. State sensory facts only. I notice my chest tightening. I see you looking away. Allow meaning to emerge co-created, not pre-scripted. This trains both body and language in responsive perception, awareness anchored in presence, not projection. The volatile, between holding and hurling, borderline anxiety and emotional oscillation. The pendulum of presence. To live as the volatile is to oscillate between flood and famine, the nervous system swinging from grasping fusion to fracturing flight. What begins as a whisper of insecurity becomes a roar of loss, not because love has vanished, but because presence has wavered. The borderline psyche experiences time not as a continuum, but as a cliff. Every absence is an abyss, every silence a severance. The nervous system, unanchored, confuses space with severing, and in the absence of a signal, imagines annihilation. Psychologically, this reflects object constancy disruption, Kernberg, 1975. The inability to maintain an internalized sense of safety or love when the external source withdraws. Neurologically, it mirrors instability within the limbic prefrontal circuitry, hyperactive amygdala, underactive anterior cingulate cortex, and inconsistent prefrontal inhibition, Silbersweg et al., 2007. Somatically, it is the body's choreography of contradiction, sympathetic surges of pursuit. Reflection prompt. When have you mistaken intensity for intimacy? Recall a moment where your closeness was driven by a crisis. What emotions surged? Fear, longing, rage? Did your words seek connection or confirmation? Identification activity. Record a dialogue where you felt abandoned. Analyze. Tone. Was your voice pleading, pushing, punishing? Pacing. Did sentences accelerate or collapse? Phrasing. Did you speak in absolutes or anchors? Rewrite one sentence with a temporal marker. Note how it shifts tone and tension. Integration practice. Anchor your next emotionally charged conversation in time. Use markers like right now, today, in this moment. Each phrase is a rope to reality, a reminder that feelings pass, even when they burn. Observe how the body responds. Does breath deepen, shoulders drop, voice warm? This is integration embodied, presence holding passion, not hurling it. The anatomy of anxiety, rigidity, responsiveness, and recalibration. Fear's geometry and the myth of mastery. There is a point at which vigilance becomes virtue, order becomes identity, and stillness is mistaken for strength. Beneath every rigid rule or perfectionistic plan lies an unspoken contract with fear, a promise that if we stay contained, we will stay safe. But fear, when fossilized into form, ceases to protect. It begins to imprison. Anxiety, in its essence, is a grammar of anticipation, a syntax of safety-seeking. Every thought rehearsed, every routine repeated, every boundary built too high speaks the same quiet phrase, I cannot afford to be surprised. In this part, we examine how anxiety translates into architectural, psychological, linguistic, and somatic aspects. We explore the archetypes that arise from this contract with control, the order keeper, whose faith in structure masks a fear of spontaneity, the watcher, whose hypervigilance transforms observation into paranoia, the volatile, whose oscillations between chaos and control reveal the nervous system's search for equilibrium. Through each, we uncover how fear's geometry shapes our language, posture, and perception, and how, through recalibration, we might transform rigidity into rhythm. Fear's geometry, boundaries as walls or windows. To the anxious mind, the world is a field of moving parts, a theatre of uncertainty. Rigidity becomes an attempt at choreography. The belief follows. If I can predict the next move, I can prevent the next wound. Yet this choreography is costly. When boundaries harden into walls, they no longer serve as instruments of discernment. They become symbols of distrust. In linguistic form, we hear this in categorical phrasing. Always. Never. Should. Must. Each word draws a straight line where life demands a curve. Fear, when crystallized, loses curiosity. It frames reality in binaries, safe, unsafe, right, wrong, clean, contaminated. This is anxiety's geometry, a map without mystery. But boundaries, in their truest form, are not barriers. They are filters. They are membranes, not moats, thresholds, not traps. They breathe. A wall says, you cannot come close. A window says, you may look in, but I decide what opens. Recalibration begins when boundaries regain their permeability, when we learn that safety is not the absence of the unknown, but the capacity to meet it. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Rigidity, then, is the refusal to sway. It is the clenching of life into a single shape. To move from rigidity to responsiveness is to rediscover balance, to replace certainty with centeredness, restore a sense of coherence. Philosophically, this is ontological security. Giddens, 1991, the felt sense that reality is stable. Without it, existence feels perilous. Thus, mastery becomes mythic. The promise that if I know enough, plan enough, perfect enough, I can transcend chaos. Yet true safety is not found in certainty, but in capacity. To be safe is not to know what comes next, but to know that we can meet it. This is the pivot from anxious control to attuned responsiveness, from rigidity to rhythm. Linguistic markers of regulation. Pacing, pronouns, presence language mirrors nervous system state. When anxious, speech accelerates, pronouns contract, and perspective narrows. When regulated, rhythm slows, pronouns expand, perspective widens. Consider these contrasts. Anxious speech. You never listen, you always leave. It's too much. Regulated speech. I feel unheard right now. Can we slow down? The former generalizes and blames. The latter specifies and includes. Linguistically, regulation sounds like temporal grounding, right now, in this moment. Somatic referencing. I notice my shoulders are tight. Collaborative pronouns. We, us, together. Each phrase situates experience in the present, names the body, and reopens the dialogue. This is NSL grammar, a syntax of safety, healing movement. From rigidity to rhythm, order to organicity. To heal anxiety is not to demolish structure, but to animate it. The goal is not chaos, but cadence, to let order dance. Rigid systems crave prediction. Rhythmic systems cultivate participation. Rigidity says hold, rhythm says flow. Somatically, this shift is from isometric tension, holding everything in place, to dynamic stability, moving while grounded. Linguistically, it's from edicts. You must, it has to be, to invitations. What if we tried? Let's explore. Recalibration practices include breath pacing, extend the exhale to signal safety. Speech slowing, match words to breath, not fear. Micro movements, gentle swaying, grounding steps, reintroducing motion. Philosophically, this is the shift from monologue to dialogue, from declaring safety to discovering it. To live rhythmically is to trust responsiveness, to believe that flexibility is not fragility, but faith, reflection. Where have you mistaken numbness for strength? Trace one memory where composure concealed fear. What did stillness protect you from? Exposure, rejection, loss of control. Identification activity. Observe a moment this week where calm felt like control. Did your voice slow or become silent? Was your calm rooted in awareness or avoidance? What sensation marked the difference? Note linguistic shifts. Did you speak in absolutes or in nuance? Integration practice. Warm composure daily. Breath, slow and full. Tone, steady yet supple. Posture, upright yet open. Speak one truth gently each day, something you'd normally withhold for fear of reaction. Let composure become connection, not containment. Next, we move toward the language of sovereignty, from control to congruence. When the body learns safety, the tongue remembers truth. And so we begin to speak not to manage but to mean. The semantics of sovereignty, power, integrity, and the language of true authority between fear and freedom lies a single sacred act, alignment. In the previous part, we traced fear's geometry, how anxious minds build architecture from uncertainty, forging walls and windows from vigilance. We saw the body's hierarchy of safety, dorsal withdrawal, sympathetic striving, ventral flow, and how each state shapes the syntax of speech. Control became language, rigidity became ritual, and safety, though hard-won, grew heavy. Now as those structures soften, we enter the domain of sovereignty, not as power over, but as power within. Here order becomes orientation, and composure matures into congruence. True authority is not an aesthetic of certainty, but an acoustics of integrity, a resonance between what is said, what is meant, and what is felt. To speak sovereignly is to translate self-trust into sound, to let the voice mirror the nervous system's steadiness and the conscience's clarity. This is the semantics of sovereignty. Power as presence, expression as embodiment, language as living alignment. The etymology of power in its oldest linguistic roots comes not from dominance but from pos, to be able. In Latin, potentia meant capacity, not coercion. Sovereignty, similarly, derives from superaneus, that which stands above, not above others, but above contradiction, fragmentation, and fear. The anxious, rigid mind seeks control, mistaking consistency for safety. The manipulative mind seeks dominion, mistaking influence for worth. The sovereign mind seeks coherence, the unity of voice, value, and vibration. In earlier parts, we met the archetypes who wore power's mask, the predator who commanded without care, the puppeteer who guided without grounding, the order keeper who managed without mercy. Each one mastered language as leverage, yet all lacked language as living truth. True sovereignty requires semantic integration, words that match physiology, intentions that mirror intonation. As the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, posits, coherence in communication is not performative but reflective. Speech is a mirror of nervous system alignment. When tone and truth diverge, language fractures. When they unite, it becomes luminous. The acoustics of integrity is not silence, nor stoicism, nor unwavering calm. It is sonic coherence, a tone that tells the truth. The sovereign voice does not need to persuade. It resonates. It is low, not loud, clear, not cold, paced, not pressed. Studies on prosody and trust, Van Ridge et al. 2020, show that listeners unconsciously detect congruence between tone and meaning. When affect and articulation diverge, cognitive dissonance arises. When they align, the body relaxes. Integrity, then, is physiological before it is moral, a felt frequency of truth. In nervous system language, NSL, integrity is experienced as ventral congruence, a state in which breath, belief, and behavior are synchronized. The diaphragm is unarmored, the larynx unforced, the syntax spacious. The voice doesn't command attention. It invites coherence. The linguistics of integrity favor declarative statements over conditionals, I language over generalization, and temporal framing. Right now, I believe, over absolutes. This is always. Each choice signals humility without hesitancy, strength without stiffness. Where manipulation whispers and anxiety repeats, integrity pauses. Silence becomes punctuation, not punishment. The sovereign speaker is not hurried. They allow their words to settle like sediment in still water, each phrase grounding rather than grasping. Reclaiming agency through honest expression. To reclaim agency, one must first locate voice. Trauma scatters language, fear fractures phrasing. Many who grew up appeasing or avoiding learn to speak in the dialects of deflection, softeners, hedges, and disclaimers. Maybe it's just me. I don't know if that makes sense. Sorry, I just thought. These are linguistic bows, micro-curtsies of compliance. They were once adaptive, but sovereignty requires unlearning apology as an accent. The shift towards sovereign speech is not a loud rebellion. It is a quiet reclamation. Compare defensive tone. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just need space. Sovereign tone. I need space to think. Let's pause here. The former defends legitimacy. The latter declares reality. Sovereign language is neither confrontation nor concession. It is clarity with care. From a cognitive behavioral frame, Beck 1976, this linguistic shift reflects a restructuring of belief. From I must please to be safe reclaimed as I can be honest and remain safe. Words become witnesses of new wiring. Articulation becomes affirmation. Philosophically, this echoes the Stoic virtue of logos, reason as alignment between speech and self. To speak truth is not to assert opinion, but to embody order. From manipulation to mastery earlier, we explored how the predator and puppeteer wielded tone, timing, and tension as tools of control. Their brilliance lay in reading others' nervous systems while ignoring their own. Charm, composure, and calculation became instruments of influence. Yet mastery without morality becomes mimicry, a hollow fluency. When tone and truth part ways, charisma corrodes into coercion. Sovereignty evolves when awareness turns inward, when one learns to read the mirror, not just the map. The same acuity once used to anticipate others' reactions becomes the awareness that calibrates one's own. In MLH, this transition marks a shift from projective linguistics, language used to manipulate perception, to reflective linguistics, language used to mirror presence. The sovereign no longer scripts others, they score themselves, tuning inner dissonance until resonance emerges. In NSL terms, this is ventral stewardship, guiding energy, not grasping control. The sovereign doesn't suppress emotion. They conduct it, modulating voice, breath, and body to maintain coherence under complexity. Mastery, then, is not command, but containment, the ability to hold power without hardening, to direct without domination. Rewriting control's grammar into stewardship syntax. Control says, I decide. Stewardship says, I discern. Control fears deviation. Stewardship trusts evolution. One micromanages, the other mindfully monitors. The grammar of control is rigid, declaratives framed as absolutes, directives devoid of dialogue. The syntax of stewardship is responsive, adaptive phrasing, inclusive pronouns, and co-creative cadence. Consider the transformation. Control, you need to do it this way. Stewardship, let's find a way that works for both of us. The sovereign shifts from imperative to invitational, from dictation to dialogue. This linguistic transition reflects a polyvagal upgrade from sympathetic push to ventral poise. Stewardship also introduces semantic humility, phrases like it seems, I sense, in my experience. These soften certainty without sacrificing substance, inviting connection while maintaining clarity. Philosophically, stewardship aligns with Aristotle's phronesis, practical wisdom. Action informed by virtue, grounded in awareness. In sovereign speech, wisdom is audible. The mirror of coherence, MLH and NSL in union, according to the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH. Every act of speech reflects the state of the speaker's nervous system. Words are vibrational mirrors, syntax, a structure of self-regulation. When language is congruent, it reinforces coherence. The nervous system hears its own harmony and stabilizes. When language is incongruent, it amplifies fragmentation. The voice betrays what the mind conceals. Nervous system language, NSL, operationalizes this by mapping states to syntax. Dorsal, collapse, short sentences, whispers, qualifiers, sympathetic, overdrive, rapid pacing, repetitions, intensifiers, ventral, flow, measured phrasing, melodic prosody, embodied pauses. Sovereignty emerges when the semantic mirror, MLH, and somatic meter, NSL, align, when what we say, how we say it, and who we are while speaking converge. Thus, linguistic sovereignty is both discipline and devotion, a practice of ongoing tuning. Practicing linguistic sovereignty theory must translate into tone. Sovereignty, like fluency, is built through repetition in regulation. Practical exercises, boundary reframing draft 2 versions of a personal limit. Defensive, I'm sorry I can't do this right now. Sovereign, this isn't the right time for me to take this on. Notice, the latter centers agency without apology. Voice audit, record a boundary spoken aloud, replay it with awareness of tone, pacing, and breath. Did your body agree with your words? Congruence sounds calm, not cold. Somatic alignment. Before hard conversations, ground through the 3 anchors. 1. Breath, lengthen exhale. 2. Body, soften jaw, release shoulders. 3. Belief, recall truth, I can be honest and remain safe. Sovereignty is somatic syntax, each muscle a modifier, each breath a bridge. Reflection prompt. What does rightful power sound like in your voice? When you speak from steadiness, what shifts in tone, intention, in truth? What would change if authority were alignment, not armor? Identification activity. Draft 2 versions of a boundary, one defensive, one sovereign. Compare their grammar, tone, and somatic signature. Which voice breathes more easily? Integration practice. For 1 week, practice linguistic sovereignty. Affirm needs and limits with calm compassion. Record and replay key moments to study congruence. Each time you align tone and truth, you restore coherence to the self and safety to the field. In reclaiming the semantics of sovereignty, we move from hierarchy to harmony, from performance to presence. Power becomes not a pose, but a pulse, not a weapon, but a wavelength. True authority is quiet not because it is unsure, but because it is secure. It does not echo to be heard, it resonates to be felt. Closing reflections. Grace, alignment, and the intelligence. Beneath the mask, every journey through the shadow ends not in revelation, but in recognition. We do not unmask to expose, we unmask to understand. What we once called flaws were forms of fluency. Each defense a dialect, each silence a syntax of survival. In tracing the architecture of fear, we have walked through the corridors of charm, control, and coldness, the 3 great disguises of the anxious mind. Each mask began as mercy. The charmer softened the threat through warmth, turning social grace into camouflage. The controller built a structure from uncertainty, binding chaos in the grammar of order. The stoic concealed tremor in stillness, mistaking suppression for strength. Together they formed a trinity of self-protection. I'll soothe, I'll steer, I'll still. Yet in seeking safety, each forfeited freedom. Charm blurred authenticity, control choked spontaneity, and coldness muted intimacy. What once guarded became governing. What once steadied became static. To heal is not to discard these masks, but to discern the intelligence beneath them, to hear the logic in the language of fear. Charm, the soft cage. The mask of charm emerged in episode 2 as the smile worn over tension, the melody hummed to muffle truth. It is the dialect of the pleaser, fluent in warmth but estranged from want. Charm promises harmony, yet demands self-erasure. In linguistic terms, charm is high-effect prosody, rhythmic laughter, rising inflection, and softened vowels, designed to soothe both speaker and listener. It signals, I am safe, you are safe, even when neither is true. But charm, left unexamined, becomes choreography, a dance performed for peace that costs presence. Each compliment curates control, each apology purchases approval. Over time, one forgets where performance ends and the person begins. To reclaim charm is not to speak coldly, but to speak congruently. Warmth divorced from truth is manipulation. Warmth married to truth is compassion. When tone and integrity align, charm becomes grace, a bridge, not a bind. The transformation lies not in silence, but in semantic honesty, saying I want, not I don't mind. I feel, not I guess. Each declarative returns sovereignty to the speaker. Charm detox is grief work. We mourn the mask that once kept us connected. Yet through grief comes grounding, the rediscovery of honest warmth, where kindness flows from clarity, not compulsion. Control, the architecture of anxiety. If charm muted care, sovereignty breathes compassion. Power is no longer a performance, it is a pulse. Composure or integrity. Many confuse composure with integrity, stillness mistaken for strength, stoicism for sovereignty. Yet composure born of fear is silence. Composure born of integrity is self-regulation. Fear-based calm says, don't move, don't feel, don't fail. Integrity-based calm says, move mindfully, feel fully, fail faithfully. The difference lies in intention. One restrains, the other roots. Integrity is the alignment of truth and tenderness, of principle and presence. It does not deny emotion, it directs it. It does not demand control, it embodies clarity. In NSL, integrity sounds like congruence, steady tempo, low tension, and open vowels. It invites co-regulation, not compliance. Ask, where does my composure come from, fear or integrity? The body knows the answer before the intellect intervenes. Fear tightens the jaw, integrity loosens the breath. Integration, discernment, awareness, authorship. Through each episode of this arc, we've traced the grammar of survival, how wounds write themselves into words. The task is not erasure, but translation. Discernment is recognizing when speech serves safety or sincerity. Awareness is hearing one's nervous system in one's own tone. Authorship is revising the script, turning reflex into response. The sovereign self is a linguistic editor, rewriting inherited phrases with present truth. I can't becomes I choose not to. I must becomes I may. I'm sorry becomes thank you for waiting. Each revision restores authorship, one syllable at a time. In integration, freedom is not looseness, it is responsiveness. The grace to bend without breaking, to flex without fracturing. Beneath the mask, intelligence as innocence, every defense was once devotion, a safety offering. Charm sought connection, control sought certainty, coldness sought calm. None were errors, all were evolutions. To call them shadows is not to shame them, but to see them as intelligent inscriptions of pain. Beneath manipulation lies memory, beneath rigidity, reverence, beneath detachment, devotion. Healing is not deletion, it is translation. The mask becomes a mirror, the armor an instrument. The ultimate sovereignty is self-interpretation, reading one's reflexes with reverence, not ridicule. Reflection prompt. Where does your composure come from, fear or integrity? Let this question echo through your body before your mind. How does fear feel when disguised as discipline? How does integrity sound when unafraid to tremble? Each pause is pedagogy, each breath a thesis on trust. Freedom is not found in looseness, but in responsiveness, the grace to bend without breaking, to respond without reacting, to lead without leaving oneself behind. When fear loosens its grip, order becomes orientation and power becomes peace. Cycles of power and pain, sadism, martyrdom, and the language of justice. When control softens, something curious happens. The psyche, no longer buffered by rules, begins to search for balance in blame. The mind that once sought safety through prediction now seeks peace through punishment, a form of moral mathematics, a logic of pain that promises closure. It is here that justice becomes theatre and language becomes gavel. Words sharpen into verdicts. You always, you never, you made me. The nervous system, addicted to order, reconstitutes hierarchy, only now in moral form. Where Episode 8 explored the architecture of control, Episode 9 ventures into its courtroom, where guilt is currency, virtue is armor, and injury becomes inheritance. Between righteousness and revenge, the Punisher archetype wields clarity like a blade, cutting through ambiguity with conviction. Their grammar is sharp, syllables clipped, tone descending. Beneath their certainty lies an injured justice, a child who learned that pain commands attention. The victim king, in contrast, rules through moral leverage. Their speech is laden with absolutes, elliptical pauses, and rhetorical questions that corner rather than clarify. After all I've done, they murmur, draped in quiet accusation. Martyrdom becomes monarchy, suffering scepter. In this cycle, both seek safety through symmetry. If I hurt, you must too. Pain becomes proof of fairness. Yet justice, when born of trauma, hungers not for balance, but for control. True repair cannot emerge from retribution, only from recognition. The linguistics of punishment has a distinct phonetic palette, low pitch, prolonged consonants, narrow tempo. It commands rather than converses. Phrases shrink towards certainty, pronouns point outward, you, and emotional syntax tightens. Victimhood, by contrast, elongates vowels, softens volume, and relies on conditional phrasing. If you really cared, maybe it's just me. Voice, in silence, in thought. May you pause long enough to hear the plea beneath it. It's not vengeance that speaks. It's vulnerability asking to be witnessed. Until next reflection, speak with integrity, listen with presence, live with alignment. You've been listening to the Linguiverse Presence Shadow Spectrum. I'm James Miller.